Alien Girl returned the human's lantern after the storm, with a glow he didn't place there. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Samantha had always thought that the storm was just another one of those endless summer downpours. It was supposed to be a brief thunderstorm, nothing out of the ordinary. But as the winds picked up, the sky turned an unnatural shade of purple, and the air crackled with an electricity that felt more alive than the usual weather patterns she had grown up with. She had stepped outside to close the windows when she saw it. There, in the midst of the storm, was a faint light. A lantern, swaying with the wind, but somehow untouched by the chaos of the tempest around it. Samantha had never seen this lantern before. It wasn't hers, yet there it was, just a few feet away from her porch, glowing in a way that was both beautiful and unsettling. The storm raged on, but the lantern remained stable, as if it had its own source of power, defying the wild gusts of wind and heavy rain. She hesitated for only a moment before she stepped forward, reaching out to grab it. The warmth of the light seeped into her fingers, and as she touched it, she noticed something strange. There was an energy to it, something that felt otherworldly. The storm around her felt louder, more intense, but the lantern's light seemed to cut through it all, like a beacon calling out to her. As she lifted the lantern, she heard a sound, almost like a soft hum, coming from the direction of the woods beyond her house. It was faint, barely audible over the storm, but it was enough to send a shiver down her spine. She couldn't explain it, but she knew that the lantern was connected to whatever that sound was. That was when she saw her, a figure emerging from the shadows of the trees, a woman, with long, dark hair and a presence that felt like it didn't quite belong. Her skin was a pale, almost glowing shade of blue, and her eyes, though distant, held a strange kind of knowing. Samantha froze, her heart racing. The woman stepped closer, walking with an eerie grace, as though the storm didn't exist around her. She didn't speak, but there was an undeniable sense of understanding between the two. Without a word, the woman reached out and gently took the lantern from Samantha's hands. Samantha's fingers tingled as it was passed to her, but she couldn't pull away. It was as if the lantern had a hold on her, guiding her through the storm. The woman didn't leave. She simply stood there, her presence both calming and unsettling, as the storm slowly began to die down. And as quickly as the storm had arrived, it was gone, leaving behind only the lingering hum of the lantern's glow. The woman turned, and with one last glance at Samantha, she walked back into the woods, disappearing as mysteriously as she had appeared. Samantha stood there, holding the lantern, staring at the spot where the woman had vanished. The storm had passed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something she didn't fully understand. She didn't know it yet, but the answers to the mysteries surrounding the lantern and the strange woman were just beginning to unfold. The next morning, Samantha woke up to a world that felt strangely still, as if the storm had left behind not only its physical remnants, but a kind of quiet that lingered in the air. The air was clear, the sun was out, and the birds had begun to chirp again, but there was something different about the way everything looked. It was as though the colors were more vivid, the world a little sharper, a little more real. She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes, still trying to make sense of the events of the night before. She glanced at the window, where the light from the morning sun cast a warm glow across the room. But it wasn't the sunlight she noticed most, it was the lantern. It sat on the small table beside her bed, its faint glow still present, despite the fact that no one had touched it since the storm. It was as though the lantern itself was alive, pulsing with energy, a subtle rhythm that seemed to beckon her closer. Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that this object was far more important than it appeared. She reached out to touch it again, and this time, she felt a slight tremor in the air around her as her fingers brushed against the surface. It wasn't just the lantern's light that was strange, it was the way it felt in her hands, like it was waiting for something, or someone. She placed the lantern down carefully and stood up, making her way to the kitchen. Her mind raced with questions. Who was the woman from the storm? Why had she given her the lantern, and what did it mean? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the woman, Arya, as she had somehow known her name, was not just some random stranger. There was a connection there, a bond that she couldn't explain but could feel deep inside. As she made herself a cup of coffee, her thoughts kept drifting back to Arya's otherworldly presence. She couldn't stop wondering where she had come from, what her story was, and why she had chosen to approach Samantha. The sensation of the lantern in her hands, that strange humming energy, haunted her thoughts. It wasn't just an object. It was a message. But from whom? And why her? Samantha's eyes wandered to the window once more, and that's when she noticed something she hadn't before, a slight shimmer on the horizon. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, like a flicker of light that didn't belong in the natural world. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could it be a sign that Arya was nearby, or was it something entirely different? Without thinking, she grabbed her jacket and slipped her feet into her boots. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing her toward that shimmer. The lantern's glow pulsed in time with her racing heart as she stepped outside. The air felt different again, as though it too was anticipating something. She walked toward the shimmer, the soft crunch of gravel beneath her boots the only sound breaking the eerie silence. The closer she got, the more pronounced the flicker became, like a mirage that refused to be ignored. As she reached the edge of the woods, Samantha paused. Her breath caught in her throat as the shimmer took form. It wasn't just a flicker anymore. It was a light, clear and bright, rising from the trees. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the sight. Was this another sign, another message? Or was it something more? And then, as if answering her unspoken question, she saw a figure emerge from the light. A figure with long, dark hair, glowing skin, and eyes that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality itself. Arya stepped into view once more, her presence just as ethereal and mysterious as it had been the night before. Without a word, she lifted her gaze to Samantha, and the two of them shared a look, one filled with unspoken understanding. Arya's lips parted, but the words that followed were soft, almost a whisper. "You've come," she said, her voice like a breeze, calm and knowing. Samantha's mouth went dry as she struggled to find the right words. I don't know why I'm here," she admitted, the uncertainty in her voice evident. Arya nodded slowly. "You are here because you were chosen," she replied. The words hit Samantha like a thunderclap, and for the first time since the storm, she felt a sense of clarity. Chosen for what? She couldn't even begin to imagine. Arya's words echoed in Samantha's mind like a soft wind brushing against her thoughts, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. "You are here because you were chosen." Chosen? Chosen for what? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The air around her felt thick with mystery, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Arya stepped closer, her presence still ethereal and otherworldly, yet strangely comforting. The soft light that seemed to radiate from her made the woods feel almost dreamlike, as if they existed in a different time or place. Samantha's heart was pounding in her chest, her mind racing with questions she couldn't even begin to form. "What do you mean? Why me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Arya's eyes, glowing faintly, met hers with an intensity that sent a chill down Samantha's spine. "You were meant to find the lantern," Arya said, her voice gentle but filled with a deep, ancient knowledge. "The lantern is a key, a bridge between our worlds. It is more than just an object. It carries with it the power to change the fate of those who hold it." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. A key? A bridge between worlds? She couldn't even fathom what Arya was talking about, but there was a part of her that felt she was on the edge of something monumental. "What do you mean by change the fate?" Samantha asked, her mind struggling to catch up with the weight of Arya's words. Arya looked at her, her gaze softening. "There is a balance, a harmony between our worlds. But something is disrupting that balance. The storm you witnessed last night was not just a natural occurrence. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous." Samantha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The storm, the strange, unexplainable storm. It had felt different, like it was alive, almost as if it had a purpose. "What is it?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling. "What is causing this disruption?" Arya took a deep breath, her gaze turning inward for a moment, as though she were searching for the right words. A force has awoken, she said quietly. One that has been dormant for centuries. It is coming, and if the balance is not restored, both our worlds will suffer. Samantha stood still, trying to absorb the magnitude of Arya's words. How can I help? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Arya stepped closer, her presence almost overwhelming now. The lantern is part of the answer, she said. It must be taken to the source. Only then can you restore the balance and stop what is coming. Samantha's head was spinning. A source? What was that? And how was she supposed to do all of this? But before she could ask, Arya was already moving, leading her through the woods with purpose. Samantha followed, her thoughts still a whirlwind of confusion. The path they walked was unfamiliar, even though she had lived in this town her whole life. The trees seemed to close in around them, casting long, twisting shadows as they ventured deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, and Samantha felt a sense of unease creeping up her spine. Where are we going? She asked, her voice small, as if afraid of disturbing the silence that enveloped them. Arya did not answer immediately, her eyes fixed. On the path ahead. The source is hidden, she said finally. It is a place that few can find, but it is the key to everything. Samantha felt her heart race once again. A hidden source, a key, a balance between worlds. Nothing about this made sense. But she also knew that she couldn't turn back now. The lantern pulsed in her hand, its glow faint but steady, like a heartbeat. Whatever was coming, whatever was threatening both their worlds, she had a role to play in stopping it. And for the first time, despite the overwhelming uncertainty, Samantha felt a strange sense of purpose. She had been chosen, and she had no idea what the future held, but she was going to find out. They continued walking through the forest, deeper into the unknown, with the mysterious lantern lighting their way. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps on the forest floor, the leaves and twigs crackling beneath their boots. Samantha kept her eyes on the ground, but the unease in her chest wouldn't go away. Everything about this felt wrong, yet it also felt like something she was supposed to be a part of. She glanced at the lantern, still glowing softly in her hands, and wondered what it meant. Arya was ahead of her, her form illuminated by the faint light of the lantern. Despite her glowing skin and almost otherworldly presence, there was something calming about her. Samantha had expected to feel more afraid, but instead, she found herself strangely comforted by the alien's calm demeanor. Where exactly are we going? Samantha finally asked, breaking the silence. Arya's gaze flicked back toward her, and for a moment, Samantha thought she saw something like a smile on her face, though it was hard to tell. The source is not far, Arya said, her voice soft but steady. It is a place of great power, but also great danger. You must be prepared, Samantha. Samantha's heart skipped a beat at the mention of danger. Prepared for what? She asked. Arya paused for a moment, looking up at the trees that loomed over them like silent sentinels. The source is guarded. Only those who are chosen, who have the strength to withstand its trials, can enter. But the storm you witnessed last night was not just the beginning of the chaos. It was a sign. The balance is already shifting. Samantha could feel the weight of Arya's words pressing down on her. She didn't know what the trials were, but she knew they were coming, and she wasn't sure she was ready. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Arya turned her head slightly, her gaze lingering on the distant horizon. You must trust the lantern. It will guide you when you need it most. Samantha held the lantern tighter, unsure what that meant, but there was an undeniable truth in Arya's words. As they continued, the forest grew darker, the shadows stretching longer, as though the trees themselves were closing in. Samantha felt a chill creep up her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Do you feel that? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Arya stopped, her head tilting as if listening for something. Yes, she said softly. The energy of the source is near. But it is not just the source you should fear. The force that threatens us is already aware of your presence. You will need all your strength to face it. The air around them seemed to hum with a strange energy, and Samantha's pulse quickened. What was this force Arya spoke of, and why was it targeting her? She wanted to ask more questions, but before she could, Arya turned and began walking again, quicker this time. Samantha followed, her steps growing faster to keep up. The trees began to thin out, revealing a small clearing ahead, bathed in an ethereal light that made everything look surreal. At the center of the clearing was a large stone archway, covered in strange markings that shimmered faintly. The lantern pulsed with a soft glow in Samantha's hands, as though it recognized the significance of the place. Arya stopped in front of the archway, her eyes fixed on it with a deep, reverent expression. "This is it," she said quietly. "The source lies beyond this archway. But to enter, you must prove yourself. Only those who are worthy can pass through." Samantha felt her heart race again. What was she supposed to do? The archway seemed to pulse with energy, the markings on it glowing brighter as they approached. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something powerful was about to unfold. Arya turned to her, her expression serious. "Are you ready, Samantha?" she asked, her voice steady but full of meaning. Samantha swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she was ready. But one thing she knew for sure, she had no choice but to try. She nodded, gripping the lantern tighter. Whatever came next, she was going to face it. Together with Arya. Together with the lantern. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, towards the archway and whatever lay beyond it. The archway loomed before them, its strange markings glowing brighter as Samantha stepped closer. Her heart pounded in her chest, the anticipation almost suffocating. Arya stood silently beside her, watching the archway as though it were a living thing, her expression unreadable. Samantha felt the weight of the moment. This was the point of no return. She couldn't turn back now. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew that there was no other choice. "You must focus," Arya said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Trust the lantern. It will guide you." Samantha nodded, tightening her grip on the lantern. The glow from the light seemed to pulse with each beat of her heart, steady and calm, but with a power that felt almost overwhelming. She stepped forward, her feet light but uncertain, as though the ground beneath her was shifting. As she neared the archway, the air grew colder, and a strange pressure built up around her. It was like the very fabric of reality was bending, shifting, just beyond her reach. Samantha could feel it, the change. The balance was tipping. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at Arya, who gave her a reassuring nod. With a deep breath, Samantha took the final step and passed beneath the archway. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the world around her seemed to change. The forest faded away, replaced by a vast, otherworldly landscape. The sky above was a deep shade of purple, dotted with swirling, glowing stars that seemed to pulse in time with the lantern. The ground beneath her was soft, like moss, and the air smelled faintly of flowers and something metallic, like the tang of electricity. It was beautiful, but it was also alien, nothing like the world she knew. The lantern's glow flickered, then steadied, casting a warm light around her. Arya stepped forward, joining her in the strange new world. "Welcome to the source," Arya said, her voice echoing slightly in the stillness. "This is where the balance begins and ends. This is where you must restore what has been lost." Samantha looked around, trying to take in the unfamiliar surroundings. There were no trees, no familiar landmarks. Only strange, crystalline structures that rose up from the ground like towers, shimmering in the dim light. The air hummed with a low, vibrating energy, almost like a heartbeat. "What do I need to do?" Samantha asked, her voice barely a whisper. She felt small, insignificant in this vast, otherworldly space. Arya's gaze softened. "You must find the heart of the source," she said. "It is the source of all life in both our worlds. If the balance is to be restored, you must reignite it. But beware, the journey will not be easy. There are trials you must face, challenges that will test your strength, your resolve, and your heart." Samantha swallowed hard. Trials? She had no idea what kind of trials she would face here, in this place. But there was no turning back. She couldn't fail, not when the fate of two worlds depended on her. The lantern in her hands pulsed again, and she instinctively knew that it was pointing her towards something important. She looked around, trying to make sense of the strange landscape, when she noticed a path forming before her. It was faint at first, just a subtle shift in the ground, but then it solidified, a glowing trail leading off into the distance. Without thinking, Samantha took a step forward, following the path, the lantern guiding her every move. Arya followed behind her, silent but ever watchful. As they walked, the landscape shifted again, the glowing towers stretching higher into the sky, and the air growing heavier with each step. Samantha felt a growing sense of urgency. What was waiting for her at the end of the path? What kind of trials did she have to face? She didn't know, but the lantern's light was her only guide, and she had no choice but to follow it. They walked for what felt like hours, though the sky above them never seemed to change. Time felt irrelevant here, as if it didn't exist in the same way it did in her world. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the source. Finally, they reached a clearing, and at the center of it stood a massive stone structure, covered in glowing symbols. The lantern pulsed brighter as they approached, and Samantha felt a deep sense of awe wash over her. This was it. The heart of the source was close. But what lay beyond it? And what trials awaited her in the shadow of this ancient power? She had no answers, but she knew one thing. She was ready to face whatever came next. The massive stone structure before them seemed to pulse with energy, the glowing symbols on its surface flickering in time with the lantern's light. Samantha stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. This was it, the heart of the source, the very center of all life in both her world and Arya's. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the ground, making the air feel thick, charged with the kind of power that could shatter anything in its path. The lantern's light flickered, casting long shadows around them, and for the first time since this journey began, Samantha felt truly scared. Arya stood beside her, her expression unreadable as she looked at the stone structure. "This is where the trials begin," she said softly, her voice filled with both warning and encouragement. "You will face what you fear the most here, Samantha. This place will test everything about you, your strength, your resolve, and your ability to make the right choices." Samantha's heart raced, and her palms began to sweat. Fear had never felt so real, but she couldn't back down now. The fate of both worlds depended on her. "What exactly do I have to do?" she asked, trying to steady her breath. Arya's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on Samantha's shoulder. "You must enter the heart of this place," she said. "Only then will the balance be restored. But be warned, the trials will not be easy. You will face illusions, tests that play on your deepest fears. You must remain focused and trust yourself, trust the lantern." Samantha nodded, though her mind was swirling with doubt. Could she really do this? Could she face whatever was inside and emerge stronger? The lantern pulsed again, as if in answer to her unspoken question, its glow steady and warm. The light felt like a lifeline, something she could hold on to when everything else seemed uncertain. With a deep breath, Samantha stepped forward, the ground beneath her soft and springy, but the air thick with the energy of the source. As she approached the entrance of the stone structure, the markings on its surface began to shift, rearranging themselves in an intricate pattern. The path forward seemed to be opening, but there was no turning back now. Arya watched her carefully, but did not move to follow. "Go," she said quietly. "Only you can do this." Samantha stepped into the structure, and immediately, the world around her seemed to warp. The air grew cold, and the soft glow of the lantern was swallowed by a deep, inky darkness. She could feel the walls of the structure closing in on her, but there was no sign of any doors or windows. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to calm down, taking slow, deep breaths. She had to trust the lantern. She had to trust herself. The ground beneath her shifted, and a low, eerie voice echoed in the darkness. "What do you fear, Samantha?" The voice was distorted, as though coming from everywhere at once, and it made her skin crawl. Samantha clenched her fists, standing her ground. "I fear failing," she said, her voice trembling. "I fear that I won't be strong enough to stop whatever is coming." The voice laughed softly, a chilling sound that seemed to reverberate through her bones. "Fail, and both your world and mine will fall into chaos." Samantha's heart thudded in her chest, but she didn't back down. "I won't fail," she said firmly. "I'll face whatever comes. I'll restore the balance." A cold gust of wind blew through the darkness, and suddenly, the world around her shifted. The shadows receded, revealing a strange, glowing landscape that stretched endlessly before her. The lantern pulsed in her hands, casting light on the scene ahead. It was both familiar and foreign, a world that felt like a twisted version of her own. The ground beneath her was cracked, and the sky above was filled with swirling, dark clouds. "This is your fear," the voice said again, its presence growing stronger. "A world destroyed by your failure. A world you could not save." Samantha's legs trembled, but she stood firm. She could feel the weight of her fear trying to drag her down, but she refused to let it control her. She gripped the lantern tighter, and the light it emitted flared brighter, pushing back the darkness. "I won't let this happen," she said through gritted teeth. "I will restore the balance." The darkness seemed to shrink back, and for a moment, everything was still. Then, with a sudden burst of light, the world around her shifted again. This time, she was standing at the entrance of the stone structure, the lantern's light glowing brightly in her hands. The darkness had receded, but she knew that the trials were far from over. The first test had been passed, but there was much more to come. And whatever lay ahead, Samantha knew one thing for sure. She was ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to restore the balance, and ready to fight for both worlds. The air around Samantha seemed to hum with an energy that vibrated in her bones. She stood in the heart of the source, the lantern in her hands glowing steadily, its warmth comforting against the coldness of the stone structure. Her first trial had been completed, but she knew that more challenges awaited her. She could feel it in the air, the weight of the unknown pressing in on her. Arya had remained silent as Samantha passed the first trial, her watchful eyes following her every move. But now the alien woman stepped forward, her expression solemn. "You have passed the first trial," Arya said, her voice gentle but filled with meaning. "But there are more. The source will test you in ways you cannot imagine. You must remain focused, Samantha. The balance depends on your strength." Samantha nodded, though her mind was still reeling from the first test. It had felt so real, that twisted vision of a broken world. She had nearly lost herself in the fear of failure, but the lantern's light had helped her push through. But what would the next trial bring? Arya's gaze softened, and she stepped closer to Samantha. "You are not alone in this, Samantha," she said quietly. "I cannot walk the trials for you, but I will always be here. The lantern has chosen you, and so has this journey. But remember, your strength will come from within." Samantha took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The lantern pulsed in her hands, its glow steady and unwavering, as though it was responding to her anxiety. She could feel the warmth of the light filling her chest, a source of calm in the midst of the unknown. "I'm ready," Samantha said, her voice firm despite the doubt still lingering in the back of her mind. Arya nodded once, then stepped back, giving Samantha space. The ground beneath them seemed to ripple, and the air grew thick again, the once calm energy now shifting, growing heavier. "The second trial begins," Arya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Samantha glanced around, her eyes searching the shifting landscape for any sign of what was to come. But the world around her remained still, like a painting frozen in time. The lantern's light flickered in her hands, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. And then, without warning, the ground cracked beneath her feet, and the world around her shifted once again. The stone beneath her feet splintered, and she felt herself falling. But before she could react, the darkness swallowed her whole. For a moment, everything was pitch black, the only sound the pounding of her heart in her ears. Samantha could feel herself tumbling, falling through a vast, empty void. The cold air rushed past her, and she struggled to hold onto the lantern, its light flickering in the darkness. She was weightless, unable to grasp onto anything. Panic surged within her, but she forced herself to breathe, focusing on the lantern, the steady pulse of its glow. The light seemed to guide her, anchoring her in the void, and slowly, the darkness began to recede. The sensation of falling began to slow, and with it, the pressure on her chest eased. She was still falling, but now it felt like she was descending into something tangible. The air grew warmer, and the darkness faded away, revealing a new world. She was no longer in the stone structure. She was standing on a narrow bridge made of glowing light, stretching out into an endless expanse. The ground below her was a dark, swirling mist, and above her was a sky filled with swirling stars and strange constellations. The bridge seemed to be the only solid thing in this vast, unknown space. This is your second trial. A voice echoed in the space around her. Samantha looked around, but she couldn't see where the voice was coming from. What is this place? She asked, her voice trembling. You stand at the edge of everything, the voice replied. This is the space between worlds, the point of no return. If you fall, you will be lost to both worlds, swallowed by the void. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. She looked down at the mist below her, its darkness seeming to stretch on forever. The bridge beneath her was narrow, and she could feel the weight of the space pressing in from all sides. What do I have to do? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. You must cross the bridge, the voice said. But remember, the void will test you. It will pull at your doubts, your fears. Only those who truly believe in themselves can cross. Samantha took a deep breath. The lantern's glow pulsed gently in her hands, its light steady and strong. She didn't know how she would make it, but she knew that she couldn't afford to fall. The bridge seemed endless, stretching out before her, but she stepped forward, one foot in front of the other, trusting the light to guide her. The further she walked, the harder the wind howled, and the more the darkness tried to pull her into the void. But she kept going, her grip tight on the lantern, her steps steady. She wasn't alone. The lantern was with her, guiding her through the fear, through the uncertainty. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. With each step, the void seemed to retreat, the bridge solidifying beneath her feet. The light from the lantern grew brighter, and soon, the bridge was no longer a narrow path, but a wide expanse of glowing energy, stretching out into the unknown. And then, with one final step, she reached the end. The light of the lantern flared, filling the space around her, and the voice echoed again. You have passed the second trial, Samantha. The air around her seemed to still, and she realized that she had crossed the bridge. She had faced her fears and walked through the darkness. She had succeeded, but she knew there was still more to come. The trials were far from over, and now, she was ready for whatever came next. As Samantha stepped off the glowing bridge, she felt the air around her shift again. The oppressive weight of the trials seemed to ease, but a new sense of urgency filled the space. The vast expanse she had just crossed now seemed like a distant memory, and ahead of her lay the final trial. The lantern in her hand pulsed softly, its glow now brighter than before, casting sharp shadows across the strange new landscape she found herself in. The path before her was clear, winding through what seemed like a dense, glowing forest, the trees towering high, their branches stretching out like arms reaching for the sky. There was an eerie quiet here, the kind of silence that felt both calming and unsettling. Arya stood beside her, her expression unreadable, but there was something else in her eyes, a deep sense of pride and expectation. The final trial, Arya said, her voice steady but filled with weight. This is the hardest of them all, Samantha. It will test your heart, your belief in yourself, and the choices you are willing to make. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. She had passed the first two trials, but this felt different. The air was thick with the power of the source, and every step she took seemed to echo with the gravity of what was at stake. What do I need to do? Samantha asked, her voice steady despite the doubt creeping in. Arya turned to face her, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light. You must make a choice, Samantha, Arya said. This final trial will ask you to choose between two paths. The path of the source will lead you to power, to knowledge, but it will also demand great sacrifice. The path of the heart will lead you to healing, to balance, but it will test your love, your loyalty. There is no right or wrong path, only the one you choose. Samantha's mind raced. Power or balance? Sacrifice or healing? She didn't know what to choose. She had always believed in doing the right thing, but now she wasn't sure what the right thing was. The lantern pulsed again, its light flickering as if urging her to decide. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to clear her mind. She thought of everything that had led her here, the storm, the lantern, Arya's guidance. And she thought of her world, the people she loved, the balance that was at stake. The choice wasn't just about her. It was about both worlds. She opened her eyes, taking a deep breath. I choose the path of the heart, Samantha said, her voice steady with determination. Arya nodded, her gaze softening, a hint of approval in her eyes. Then the trial has begun, Arya said. As soon as the words left her mouth, the ground beneath Samantha's feet shifted. The glowing forest faded, replaced by a soft, golden light that surrounded her. She was no longer in the dense woods, but standing on a wide, open field. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers, and the sky above was a brilliant blue. For a moment, it felt like everything was perfect, like the world was in balance. But then, she saw them. Shadows in the distance. Figures moving toward her, their faces familiar but distorted, like ghosts of the past. Her heart clenched as she recognized them. People she had known and loved, but now they were hollow, empty versions of themselves. The first figure was her mother, but her eyes were dark and empty, her face pale and lifeless. The second figure was her best friend, Emma, but she was trembling, her eyes filled with sorrow. And then there was her little brother, Jason, standing alone, looking lost and afraid. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Arya's voice echoed in her mind. "This is the path of the heart, Samantha. These are the people you love, but they are lost to you, taken by the imbalance that threatens both worlds. You must choose. Will you save them, or will you save the balance?" Samantha felt a pang of desperation. She wanted to reach out to them, to save them from whatever had twisted them into these empty shells. But she knew that if she chose them, if she tried to save them, she might destroy everything else. The lantern in her hands pulsed once again, its light flickering as if urging her to make a decision. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her choice pressing down on her chest. The figures in front of her moved closer, their eyes pleading, but Samantha knew that she couldn't give in to the temptation. She had to choose the balance. "I choose the balance," she said, her voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. The moment the words left her mouth, the figures vanished, dissolving into the air. Like mist, the golden light surrounding her began to fade, and the world seemed to shift again. Samantha stood alone in the field, the lantern still glowing in her hands, its light steady and true. She had made her choice, and now, the path ahead was clear. She had passed the final trial, but the journey was far from over. She turned toward Arya, who stood quietly beside her, a look of understanding on her face. "You have chosen wisely, Samantha," Arya said softly. "Now, the balance is restored. The source is safe, but there is still much work to be done." Samantha nodded, knowing that her journey was just beginning. She had chosen the heart, but the true test would be in what came next. And whatever that was, she would face it with the same strength, the same determination that had brought her this far. Samantha stood still for a moment, the soft glow of the lantern still flickering gently in her hands. She had made her choice, and now the path was clear. The figures of her family and friends, the haunting versions of them, were gone, fading like mist in the morning light. The golden light that had surrounded her now dimmed, leaving her standing alone in the quiet, vast expanse of the source. Despite the peace that came with her decision, a new sense of responsibility settled over her, heavy but not unwelcomed. She had chosen the balance, but that choice had come with a price she still didn't fully understand. Arya stood beside her, watching her with a quiet understanding in her eyes. Samantha could feel her presence, calming yet strong, a reminder that she was not alone in this. "You've done well, Samantha," Arya said softly, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "The balance has been restored, and the source is safe, for now. But this is not the end. It is only the beginning of a new journey, one that will require even more strength, more understanding than you could have imagined." Samantha nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the realization that the trials, though over for now, had only marked the beginning of something much greater. She had saved the balance, but she knew there was still much work to be done. "What comes next?" Samantha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that whatever was ahead would challenge her in ways she hadn't yet imagined. Arya turned her gaze towards the horizon, where the light from the lantern flickered against the darkening sky. "The worlds are connected, but the balance between them is fragile. The disruption you felt, the storm that began it all, was just the first sign. There are forces beyond even our understanding that seek to upset this balance. They will not stop until they have what they want. It is your responsibility to ensure that the source remains protected, that the forces of chaos do not consume everything. Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought the trials were the hardest part, but this was the real challenge. Protecting the source, safeguarding the balance between their worlds. It felt like a monumental task, one far greater than she was prepared for. But she also knew that she couldn't turn back now. She had chosen this path, and she had already sacrificed too much to stop. "How do I protect it?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of Arya's words pressing down on her. Arya looked back at her, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. "You will not face this alone, Samantha. The lantern will guide you, but you must also seek the help of those you trust. You cannot carry this burden alone. The path ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet fathom, but you will find your way." Samantha nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling into her bones. It was true. She couldn't do this alone. She had to rely on others, on the people she loved and trusted, to help her keep the balance intact. The future was uncertain, and she knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But one thing was clear: she was ready. Ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to fight for the balance, and ready to protect the source at all costs. "I won't fail," Samantha said, her voice firm with conviction. Arya gave her a nod, her eyes softening with approval. "I know you won't." The lantern pulsed once more, its glow bright and steady, as if acknowledging Samantha's resolve. And with that, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift again, the air growing warmer, lighter. The source, it seemed, was alive, and it was responding to her, to the choices she had made. The future was unknown, but Samantha knew one thing for certain: her journey had only just begun. The trials had tested her, had shown her the strength she didn't know she had, but now it was time to face the true challenge. With the lantern's light guiding her, and the knowledge that she wasn't alone, Samantha took her first step forward into the future, ready for whatever came next. The balance had been restored, but the fight to protect it was only beginning.